Hello folks, and today I'm sad to say that we're nearly at the end of our series here, at least in its linear order. We've gone through almost every Doctor and every era with their stories. But what we haven't talked about is an entity in Doctor Who that rivals even the show itself in terms of iconography to pop culture in Britain. The Daleks. Being in the show for almost as long as the Doctor himself, these mutated colored remains have become almost iconic as the show itself, producing a number of spin-off movies, books, novels, annuals, and many more. And with so much content regarding the Daleks, this also leaves a window open for content that didn't get made. So I thought I would cover some of the Dalek stories that nearly got made. This would include its own TV show, another movie, and stories that never were. So to talk a bit briefly about the origins of the Daleks, they were invented in 1963 along with a TV show in one of the first scripts by a writer named Terry Nation, who you can see on screen here. Ever since the Daleks' first appearance in the show, Terry Nation had made it his mission to market the Daleks as their own singular entity, showing them off at public events consistently, giving the Daleks their own annual, and this would build until about 1966, when Terry Nation decided that he wanted to make his own Dalek TV show. In doing this, he tried to get it launched with an American company, with ITV, amongst other different production companies, with him feeling that the BBC were taking too much time on handing him over the rights. If everything that's said is true, then post-1965 we would have never seen any Dalek stories in Doctor Who again, nor would we have been able to see any repeats. So one of the biggest staples of Doctor Who in general would have been gone. Luckily enough for us, the show was never made, and Doctor Who got the Daleks back in the early 70s with Day of the Daleks. But during this time, there were many scripts that were proposed for the show apparently, but the most well-known one is the pilot episode, The Destroyers. The only reason I'm technically including this is because BBC were largely the reason that it wasn't made, so I'm classing it as a Doctor Who episode, even though it would have been its own TV show and probably will get mentioned in a later video by me. But the premise of this story would have seen Sarah Kingdom and the rest of the space exploration team return. If you don't know who they are, they appeared in Dalek's Master Plan and were a key part of that story, where the exploration base would have been under attack from the Daleks. The story would have seen the Daleks and the space team navigate the planet and try and survive, with Sarah Kingdom being taken as prisoner. There's a lot more to this story than what I've said, but I wouldn't want to spoil it because there is an actual way to view this story, or rather listen to it. As Big Finish have produced this as part of their Lost Stories section, I would highly recommend that you check it out. This is more interesting to me for the whole behind-the-scenes idea of it. Launching a Dalek-exclusive TV show sounds really ballsy, especially considering all the hype and popularity they had been in Doctor Who at that time. And I'd definitely have been very interested to have seen it, especially if that space exploration team were going to be in it, because then you have some heroes to fight the Daleks. And just like with Doctor Who, you have some relatable, human-ish characters that you can get invested in, so I think it would have done quite well. I just would have hated to have seen the Daleks leave Doctor Who so early. Now, this is quite a famous bit of unmade Dalek media, but you may have heard the story before. During the 1960s, Daleks were all the rage. Everybody in Britain knew what a Dalek was. With that came the Dalek movies starring Peter Cushing as the First Doctor, or Doctor Who. These two movies were recreations of the Daleks and the Dalek invasion of Earth, respectively. This was probably the biggest capitalization on the popularity of the Daleks at the time, and it kind of paid off well enough to receive a third movie, or so people thought. And in fact, there was a plan to do one. Sometime after the broadcast of The Chase, so around 1967-68, it was proposed that they do a third Dalek movie based on that story, dubbing it The Daleks vs. the Mechanoids. Now, not a lot is known as to why it never got off the ground. There's no confirmed reason, but we can assume that they maybe lost a bit of money on the last two movies. Without too much evidence of this even being proposed, it's very hard to talk about, but I personally would have been very happy to see the Mechanoids on screen, to see if they could have been done better than they were in the show itself. Maybe a bit closer to Terry Nation's original vision. I personally theorise that this wasn't made because this was around the time that Terry Nation wanted to make the Dalek TV series, and having a movie, TV series and Doctor Who going all at the same time might have been a bit confusing. I mean, personally, I would have loved to have seen the Daleks Master Plan done on a big screen. I know that would have been a grander project, and you probably would have had to condense the story a little bit, but I think it would have been a very, very decent movie. The last story I wanted to talk about was an actual proposed Doctor Who story, not a movie, not a spin-off. This was an actual episode of Doctor Who that did end up getting made later on. This story was submitted for the 27th season of Doctor Who and was written by John Peel. This story was called War of the Daleks. Now, if that story sounds familiar, I have actually talked about that novelisation on the channel before, as it was later released in the BBC Books range as an 8th Doctor novel. This story would have seen a conclusion to the entire storyline of the Daleks in the 1980s, where Skaro would be returned from death. This story also made a bunch of alterations to canon Dalek stories, some that some people like and some that others do not. The most controversial of the lot is that Destiny of the Daleks has been retconned so that it does not take place on Skaro, and that the Movelleds are a creation of the Daleks to fake a war, to fake a reason for Davros to come back to them. Added on to this, that the Daleks allowed Davros to escape in Resurrection of the Daleks. They also hoped that he would go straight back to 1963 so he could obtain the Hand of Omega, where that went a bit wrong and he made his own race of Daleks. The other major retcon is that in Remembrance of the Daleks, he doesn't actually destroy Skaro. Davros ends up destroying Antolin, which is the planet from Revelation of the Daleks. Now, that is the one I disagree with the most, because I think the end of Remembrance of the Daleks is really cool, and I wouldn't change that personally. But some of these retcons are very acceptable, and I'm really happy with them. They deepen the Dalek lore, and some of them may even be considered canon these days. Would it have worked as a story? I don't know. I really don't. I think there's definitely some good ideas in here, but is there enough to justify it being a TV story? Not for me. The only positive I can see of it would be it would give the Daleks a rest for a good 5-6 years if the show continued. And that is definitely what they needed by that point, because even though Remembrance is fantastic, by that point they had been in 3 stories in like 5-6 years. So these are the 3 chosen Dalek stories that you will never see. This has been a really interesting video for me because I've done a lot of research into this and finding out about the greatest villains in television possibly, and how they nearly got their own show and how their canon could be entirely different right now if one story was made. It's fascinating. In the future, I might do this with the Cybermen as well, just to see what stories the Cybermen could cook up, because I'm sure there's a lot. But yes, that's going to be it from me today. Join me next time when I talk about Modern Who's best episodes that you will never see, and that will be out very soon.